When I first stood in front of the small townhouse I had just purchased, I couldn't hold back my tears. 7 years of long hours, skipped vacations, and countless sacrifices had finally brought me here. I was no longer the girl renting a cramped apartment with paper, thin walls. I was now the owner of my very first home. My name is Elena Carter, and for as long as I can remember, I dreamed of having a place I could truly call my own. My family, especially my mother, Vivian, and my older brother, Marcus, always mocked the idea, saying I was wasting my life chasing walls and bricks. They thought I should marry young and let a husband provide, but that wasn't me. I worked as a financial analyst, often pulling late nights, sipping on cheap coffee, and budgeting every penny. While my friends traveled, shopped, and lived carefree, I was saving. I cut my own hair, wore thrift store clothes, and sometimes even skipped meals to keep my savings intact. Each time I deposited money into my account, I reminded myself that every sacrifice was a brick in the home I would someday own. And finally, I made it. The house wasn't a mansion, but to me, it was a palace. 3 bedrooms, a little garden, and wide windows that filled the rooms with sunlight. I wanted to share this moment with the people who had seen my struggles, even if they hadn't supported me. I planned a small housewarming celebration, inviting my entire family. I decorated the place with fresh flowers, set the dining table with homemade food, and even baked my mother's favorite cake, hoping maybe, just maybe, they would feel proud of me. But as the hours passed that evening, the laughter I expected never came. The food grew cold, the candles melted down, and the silence inside my dream home felt heavier than the years of struggle I had endured. My phone sat on the counter, untouched, with no messages, no calls, no excuses. No one came. And in that suffocating silence, I realized something. I had built my dream home. But my family had built a wall between us that no amount of sacrifice could tear down. The next morning, I woke up to a mess I hadn't planned for. Half-melted candles, cold dishes untouched on the table, and empty chairs staring back at me like a cruel reminder. My heart was heavy, but what hurt the most wasn't the silence of the house, it was the silence of my family. I dialed my mother, Vivian, expecting at least an apology or some flimsy excuse. Instead, her voice came sharp and unapologetic. "Elena, don't be dramatic. We were busy. Marcus had a business dinner, and I didn't see the point of rushing for some house party. Honestly, you act like buying a home is something extraordinary. People do it all the time." Her words cut deeper than she realized. Just a house party. Did she not understand that this was my entire life's work, my blood and sweat condensed into these walls? When I reached out to Marcus, my older brother, he barely paid attention. "Look, Elena," he said, his tone laced with arrogance. "I'm negotiating deals worth millions. Do you really think I could drop everything to sit around in some suburban living room, eating cake? Grow up." I held back tears as he spoke. Marcus had always looked down on me, seeing me as the little sister who never matched his ambitions. In his eyes, my success would never be enough. Still, I tried to swallow my pride. That week, I sent them pictures of the house, the garden, the sunlit kitchen, even the cozy guest room I had prepared for when they might visit. But the only response I received was silence, or worse, dismissive comments. One evening, I overheard something that shattered me even more. My cousin, Rachel, who had always been close to me, called and hesitated before confessing. "Elena, they're saying behind your back that you only bought the house to show off. Marcus told everyone you'll end up broke paying for it. Aunt Vivian said you're just lonely, trying to fill the emptiness with walls." I froze. My own family, the people I wanted to impress, to share joy with, were mocking me. Instead of celebrating my hard-earned achievement, they turned it into gossip. That night, as I sat on the living room floor, staring at the mortgage papers and my keys lying on the table, something inside me shifted. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was lonely. But if that loneliness had built me a home of my own, then I would embrace it. What I wouldn't embrace any longer was begging for their approval. I had fought 7 years for these walls. And if they didn't see my worth, Then I would make sure one day they'd regret underestimating me. Days turned into weeks, and the silence from my family grew heavier. I stopped trying to reach out. No more calls, no more pictures of my progress decorating the house. The rooms that once felt too big for me now became sanctuaries of peace. But peace never lasts when bitterness brews in the background. One Friday evening, I bumped into an old neighbor, Mrs. Harrington. She was warm and kind, and she had known me since childhood. With a smile, she congratulated me on the house, but then she paused. "Elena, dear, I probably shouldn't say this, but your brother Marcus. He's been telling people that you didn't even buy the house yourself. That some mystery man helped you. He says there's no way you could afford it on your own." My cheeks burned with anger. So that was their narrative. Instead of acknowledging the years I worked 2 jobs, saving every penny, sacrificing vacations and even friendships, they had decided my achievement was tainted, impossible, unbelievable. The betrayal ran deeper than ever. My family wasn't just absent. They were actively destroying my reputation. Still, I refused to break. I poured my energy into my career, taking on projects that doubled my income. I started hosting small dinners for colleagues and friends who actually valued me. Unlike my family, these people clinked glasses, admired the home, and told me how proud they were of what I had accomplished. But fate has a way of revealing truths at the right moment. One afternoon, as I returned from the grocery store, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked outside my house. And there, standing by the door, was my mother Vivian, dressed impeccably, clutching her handbag, with Marcus standing beside her, arms crossed. I froze, every emotion bubbling up: hurt, anger, betrayal. What were they doing here after months of silence? Marcus smirked when he saw me. "Finally. We were starting to think you were avoiding us." I clenched the keys in my hand. "Avoiding you? After everything you've said about me? After mocking me behind my back? You have no right to stand here." Vivian sighed dramatically, as though I was the one being unreasonable. "Elena, don't twist things. Families argue, families misunderstand. But we're here because we need to talk. It's important." Her tone was softer than usual, but there was something in her eyes. An edge of desperation. I let them in, though my gut told me this wasn't a reunion out of love. They didn't congratulate me, didn't apologize. Instead, Marcus got straight to the point. "Elena, Mom and I think you should consider putting this house under all of our names. You know, for the family. It'll be safer that way." For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. The audacity left me speechless. They had ignored me, ridiculed me, and now, suddenly, they wanted a share of my house. That was when I realized. Their absence at my celebration wasn't about indifference. It was about control. They hadn't come because they didn't want to acknowledge that I had achieved something entirely on my own. And now, with my success undeniable, they were back, like vultures circling something they never helped build. I sat down slowly, my heart beat loud in my ears. This wasn't going to end with them walking over me again. This time, I would make them pay. When Marcus and Mom walked out of my house that afternoon, demanding a share, and smiling as if they'd done nothing wrong, something inside me finally snapped. Not with spite, but with a clear, cold resolve. I would not beg for respect. I would make sure they could not touch what I had built. And I would not let them keep pretending their cruelty never happened. First thing the next morning, I called a lawyer. I sat across from him in a small, windowless office, while he listened without blinking. "You're not the first person whose family expects a handout," he said, paging through my paperwork. "But you are in the best position to protect yourself. Deed, mortgage, insurance. We'll tighten every lock the law allows." We started with the simple practicalities. I changed the locks and had new keys cut, not out of pettiness, but to reclaim my safety and privacy. I updated my homeowner's insurance and authorized my lawyer to draft a letter outlining my property rights and warning that any attempt to coerce or claim the house would be met with legal action. I moved my savings out of the account Marcus had once joked about borrowing from. the one he'd said I couldn't manage alone, and into a trust set up for my own protection. Each protective step felt like a brick laid in a foundation of self-respect. But legal safety was only the scaffold. I wanted the social roof, the community recognition that would make their lies harder to perpetuate. If Marcus had been telling anyone this house was purchased with mysterious help, then the story had to be corrected where it mattered among people who knew the truth. Mrs. Harrington, my old colleagues, my neighbors, the small circle who'd seen my late nights and my thrifted lunches. So I invited them. Not for pity, but for witness. I cooked simple food, honest food, and sent handwritten notes. Come for tea. I want you to see my home. The turnout was quiet, warm, and immediate. Mrs. Harrington hugged me so hard she whispered, "You deserve every sunbeam in these windows." A young colleague I'd mentored brought flowers, and a list of people willing to testify that I alone had managed the finances, negotiated the mortgage, and weathered the lean years without help. Meanwhile, I let Marcus and Vivian continue their performance. I never called them out in angry texts or posts. I let their silence and their entitlement do the talking. Inside, I documented everything. I saved the messages where Marcus joked I couldn't afford the place. I recorded the offhand phone calls where Vivian mocked my little house project. The evidence was small but damning, when assembled into a timeline, a pattern of disdain, not of concern. Then I set the stage for accountability. At my little tea, I asked the oldest neighbors to speak about how long they'd watched me save. Mrs. Harrington told the story of the $2 coffee I always bought instead of a proper lunch, of the folders of budgets I'd carry on the subway. My colleague described project after project I'd stay late for. Elbow grease and overtime that paid for each tile, each coat of paint. One by one, these quiet attestations stitched together the truth this house had been earned. Word traveled. Marcus's whispered rumors lost their audience. People who'd once nodded at his jibes now looked at him askance when he tried to smirk about me. Pride is brittle when the foundation is witnessed by others. One sharp autumn evening, Marcus knocked on my door, face strained. "You can't keep doing this," he said, voice low. "You're making us look bad." I didn't answer immediately. I walked him to the living room where the receipts, photos, and bank statements, the same ones I'd shown my neighbors, lay in a neat folder on the coffee table. "If you want to talk facts, I said. "These are mine. Every single one." I watched the color leave his face as he read the timeline, my pay stubs, my transfer history, names of the contractors I'd negotiated with directly. There was no mystery donor, no secret patronage, only work, only sacrifice. He tried to claw back dignity with anger. "You embarrassed us," he spat. "You should have done this privately." "Privately?" I echoed. "You'd rather keep the lie private so you don't look small." "No. I built this in public. You refused to watch when I struggled. You can either learn from it, or you can leave." Marcus left that night muttering. For all his bluster, he couldn't manufacture the receipts, or the witnesses who'd seen me grind through years. I'd done the work, the world had taken note. The last piece fell into place when I quietly informed my bank, and my lawyer, that any attempts to access accounts jointly would be denied, and that I would pursue harassment claims for coercive behavior. I didn't want to trap them or ruin them. I wanted to stop the slow theft of my confidence, and the gaslighting that had made me doubt my own accomplishments. In the weeks that followed, I felt something shift. Marcus stopped dropping by to check in. My mother called less often. When she did, her voice held a new, uneasy politeness. The family gossip network that once swarmed my small victories had nowhere to land. I did not take joy in their discomfort. My revenge was never about making them suffer for its own sake. It was about drawing a line and making sure they could not walk across it again. There were evenings I still sat at my kitchen table and wept. For what we had lost, for what I had given up to get here. But those tears were no longer for validation. They were for release. The house began to feel like home in more honest ways. Friends' laughter echoed off the ceilings, My neighbor's cat curled on the windowsill. I planted herbs in the sunlit box outside the kitchen. The walls held my work instead of their whispers. And when, months later, a small article ran in the local paper about first-time homeowners and the sacrifices they'd made, a neighbor's text arrived. "We're proud of you, Elena." That 3-word message landed like a benediction. Marcus called once more, quieter this time. "Do you forgive me?" he asked. I thought of the years I'd tried to be forgiven for wanting something different. "I forgive," I said slowly, "but forgiveness doesn't mean erasing what happened. It means I won't let it define me anymore." He accepted that, for now. I had done what I needed to do, protected my home, reclaimed my dignity, and taught them the price of treating someone's achievement like a joke. And as the first snow fell that winter, settling like a hush across my garden, I realized I had something more valuable than approval. I had built a life that stood on its own. Winter passed into spring, and with each season the house became less a symbol of conflict and more a testament to resilience. Still, the wound of my family's betrayal had not fully closed. I had protected myself legally, rebuilt my dignity socially, and reclaimed my narrative. But there was one last chapter to be written, one where the balance of power shifted entirely. The opportunity came unexpectedly. A relative's birthday gathering was being held at my Aunt Margaret's place. Normally, I would have avoided such events after the humiliation I'd endured at the housewarming, but something inside me told me this was the moment. My mother would be there, Marcus too, and so would the cousins who had once believed the gossip. I arrived deliberately late, dressed with quiet elegance, carrying nothing but a small envelope. The chatter dimmed when I walked in. Some looked guilty, others curious. My mother glanced at me with a mix of surprise and something that looked like regret, though pride stiffened her posture. I waited until the meal was finished before I rose. "I have something to share," I said, voice steady but carrying across the room. From the envelope I pulled copies of the article about first-time homeowners, my name highlighted, my story told in plain ink. Alongside it were letters of support from my neighbors and colleagues, people who had witnessed my journey. The room went silent. Every eye moved between me and Marcus, who shifted uncomfortably in his chair. For years, I continued. I saved every penny, worked overtime, and lived frugally to build the life I dreamed of. When I finally achieved it, instead of celebration, I was met with mockery, lies, and abandonment. I let the words hang heavy. But the truth cannot be erased. I earned every stone of that house. Someone, my cousin Clara, spoke first. "We should have been there. I'm sorry, Elena." A murmur of agreement followed. Others nodded, some shame-faced, some sincerely moved. The tide had turned, not with vengeance shouted, but with truth revealed. Marcus stood abruptly, his face red. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "We didn't mean." But my mother's sharp look cut him off. For once, she had no defense, no excuse. Instead, she lowered her gaze. That small act of silence, from a woman who had always wielded words like weapons, was the greatest admission of guilt I could have asked for. I did not need to humiliate them further. The room had seen enough. I folded the papers, tucked them back into the envelope, and said, "I don't share this to shame anyone. I share it so that lies cannot stand where truth belongs." Then I sat down, calm, unshaken. The shift was palpable. Conversations resumed, but differently, warmer toward me, cooler toward Marcus and my mother. By the end of the night, people were seeking me out, asking about my garden, my work, my future. For the first time, I wasn't the outsider. My revenge was never about ruining them. It was about reclaiming what they had stolen from me. My pride, my voice, my place. And in that living room, surrounded by family who finally saw me clearly, I realized I had done exactly that. Weeks later, Marcus called again. This time there was no anger, only wariness. "I don't know what to say anymore," he admitted. "You don't need to say anything," I replied softly. "Just stop pretending my life is yours to define." We ended the call there, and I felt lighter than I had in years. The house stood behind me like a sentinel when I returned home that evening. lights glowing warmly through the windows. No longer just a building, it was a monument to endurance, a fortress of self-respect. And as I locked the door, I whispered into the stillness, "This is mine. Always mine." That was the real victory. Not their apology, not their silence, but my unshakable knowledge that I had won.